Hey everyone! Tonight we step into a story that begins in the coldest possible way, snow falling outside, church bells waiting to ring, and me waking up in my own house with a cruel note pinned to my pillow. You might not survive this one, because the truth cuts sharper than any blade. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And please, drop a comment with your location and your local time. I love knowing where and when my stories reach you. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. I opened my eyes that morning, and for a second, I thought it was any other day. Then the smell hit me sharp, chemical, sterile, antiseptic. I reached a trembling hand to my head and felt nothing but slick, burning skin. My silver hair, the crown I'd cared for all my life, was gone. My scalp stung like fire, every nerve alive with humiliation. Pinned to the pillow was a note, written in neat blue ink with a crude little heart at the end. Congratulations. You finally have a haircut that matches your age. Have a great day at my wedding. At Manhattan. My chest tightened and tears surged, but I swallowed them back down. No, I would not give Sabrina that victory. On the nightstand, I saw an ivory envelope. The same perfume I'd smelled 100 times on my soon-to-be daughter-in-law clung to the paper. I didn't need to guess who left it there. I staggered to the marble-tiled bathroom and froze in front of the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't me, at least not the Beatrice Langford I knew. She wasn't the real estate CEO who built towers across Boston. She was a stripped, humiliated mother, robbed of her dignity on the day she should have stood tall as the groom's mother. I turned away before the tears could fall and walked to the safe by the wall. Inside was an envelope holding the paperwork to transfer $22 million to Michael and Sabrina as their wedding gift. I had planned it for months, hoping it would be the bridge that kept my son close, that softened Sabrina's sharp edges. But as my hand touched it, the paper felt different. Not smooth anymore, sharp, like a blade. The decision came as steady as the click of the safe when I closed it again. That money would never leave my hands. I picked up the phone and dialed Avery Whitman, our family attorney. He answered on the second ring. Beatrice, ready to sign off on the transfer? Everything's prepared. I kept my voice even. Avery, put it on hold. Not a single dollar moves. Tonight, after the reception, meet me at my house. We're rewriting the will. A pause. Is something wrong? I closed my eyes. Just one thing, I said quietly. I finally woke up. Hanging up. I walked into my closet and pulled out a navy silk dress, the one I'd bought for myself after closing a 30-story tower deal. I smoothed the cool fabric with trembling hands. It wasn't just a dress anymore. It was armor. The landline rang again. This time, it was Lucia, my hairstylist of 20 years. She must have already heard whispers. My throat tightened, but I kept steady. Lucia, I need you here right now. Bring the best wig you have. No one can know. She didn't pry. She only whispered, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I sat in the armchair by the frosted window, watching snow drift over the yard, covering the brick paths I'd walked 1,000 times. Memories crashed down the day I became a widow at 32. The night I buried my husband with 12-year-old Michael asleep in my arms. the vow I swore that night that he would never know hunger or fear. I kept it, brick by brick, deal by deal, sacrifice by sacrifice. And now all of it my work, my love, my fortune was supposed to be handed to a woman who saw me as disposable. The doorbell rang. Lucia entered with a long black box. She gasped when she saw my scalp, but I cut off her pity with a tight smile. Don't ask. Just help me stand tall today. It took an hour, but when she fitted the soft silver wig over my head, the mirror reflected someone else entirely. The fragile, humiliated widow was gone. In her place was the woman who had clawed her way into respect, sharp, composed, unbroken. I thanked Lucia, slipped an envelope into her hand, and when she left, I tucked a small voice recorder into my purse. Instinct told me today was about more than appearances. Words without proof could be denied. Words recorded could not. The clock read 10 a.m., 3 hours until the ceremony at St. Andrew's, one of Boston's oldest churches. I wrapped a gray wool coat around me, pulled on the cashmere scarf Michael had given me years ago, and whispered, "Son, today you'll see how badly you misjudged your mother." Outside, the cold wind slapped my face, but I didn't flinch. My driver asked if I was all right. I shook my head. I needed silence to feed the fire burning inside me. As we drove past couples holding hands and families walking children across the snowy streets, I wondered how many had been betrayed by the ones they trusted most. How many had to choose between love and self-respect? When the car stopped at the church gates, I pressed my hand to my chest and felt calm rise, steady and strong. They thought they had humiliated me. They thought they had erased my pride, but in truth, they had woken me up. I stepped out, adjusted my scarf, and smiled not for the crowd, not for my son, not for my enemy. I smiled for me. The church bells hadn't started yet, but St. Andrew's already buzzed with activity when we arrived. White roses lined the aisle. Golden candles flickered against the high stone arches, and the air smelled faintly of incense. The wedding planners rushed about, smoothing tablecloths, arranging bouquets, giving the illusion of perfection. Perfection. That was always Sabrina's obsession. I kept my coat pulled tight as I stepped inside, the silver wig firmly in place. To anyone looking, I was polished, poised. No one would guess what humiliation I'd faced that morning, but beneath that calm, my chest burned with a quiet fury. The first thing I did was check the safe in my mind. The $22 million gift was still locked away in my house, untouched. That simple fact gave me strength. The woman who had been willing to hand over her entire fortune to keep her son close was gone. The woman walking into this church was someone else. While staff hurried down the aisle, I slipped into a pew near the front. I pressed a hand to the purse at my side. Inside, the tiny recorder glowed faintly red. Just knowing it was there steadied me. Today wasn't only about survival, it was about proof. My phone buzzed against the purse. It was Avery again. I answered quietly. "Beatrice, I've put the transfer on hold. Do you want me to prepare the new documents tonight?" "Yes," I whispered. "And not just the transfer. We're rewriting everything. My will, the trusts, every clause with Michael's name on it." A pause. Then Avery said, "That's a big step." "Are you certain?" I looked at the candlelight shimmering across the stained glass windows, the colors bending into strange patterns. "I've never been more certain." Money in the wrong hands is just fuel for betrayal. When I hung up, I sat back, drawing slow breaths. My scalp still throbbed faintly beneath the wig, but I refused to flinch. Around 10:30, I slipped back outside for air. Boston's cold hit my face like a slap, but it cleared my thoughts. The driver asked if I needed to head home. I shook my head. Not yet. I have something to prepare for. The car ride to my house was quiet, the city blurring past. When I walked inside, the air still smelled faintly of antiseptic, a cruel reminder of the morning's assault. But I didn't linger. I went straight to the closet, pulled open the drawer, and found the gray silk shawl I hadn't worn in years, draping it across my shoulders. I felt taller, armored. Lucia called as I adjusted it. "Beatrice, are you holding up?" I closed my eyes, steadying my voice. "Lucia, you saved me this morning. That wig, it's more than hair. It's armor. Thank you." She laughed softly. "Then go show them you're still the Beatrice they should fear." Her words lingered as I returned to the car. On the drive back to the church, I thought about Michael, my sweet boy who once begged me not to leave him alone on the first day of school. My boy who cried into my blouse the night his father died. My boy who once said, "Mom, when I'm rich, I'll take care of you." And yet here I was, humiliated, mocked, about to hand over my life's work to a woman who saw me as a nuisance. A bitter smile touched my lips. No more. Did you know that in ancient Rome, wills were sometimes read aloud in the Forum, so the public could bear witness to justice? Some historians debate whether it was transparency or cruelty, but I think it was both. Transparency forces truth into the light. That's what I planned for tonight. When we pulled up again to St. Andrew's, the church bells were just beginning their practice peals. Guests were arriving in sleek coats and bright smiles, their laughter rising in the frosty air. I stepped out of the car, spine straight, shawl tight. No one would see me broken. I walked up the stone steps slowly, deliberately. Inside, the choir rehearsed, voices swelling against the high arches. I took a pew near the front, folded my hands, and let the hymn wash over me. Around me, guests whispered, complimenting the flowers, remarking on the bride's beauty, the groom's success. I sat silent, my purse warm on my lap, the recorder waiting like a hidden sword. When the organ swelled louder, I closed my eyes and breathed deep. The morning had begun with humiliation, but the day was far from over. Sabrina thought she had stripped me of dignity. Michael thought I was too weak to refuse him, but they had forgotten one thing. I wasn't just a mother. I was the woman who built towers in this city brick by brick. I was the woman who rose from widowhood to an empire. And today, I would remind them who I truly was. The stained glass windows glowed with morning light, splashing the pews in reds and greens. And I sat there, hands folded tight, pretending to pray. My lips moved, but the words weren't to God. They were to myself. Beatrice, remember who you are. It's funny how pain dredges up memories you thought were buried. Sitting in that church, listening to the choir rehearse, I found myself back at the beginning the night I lost Richard, my husband, and everything changed. I was only 32. Michael was 12. Richard had promised to be home for dinner, but instead, I got a call from the highway patrol. A heart attack. Quick, final, merciless. 1 minute, I was a wife planning leftovers. The next, I was a widow holding a folded death certificate in a sterile hospital hallway. Michael fell asleep in my arms, his face wet with tears, while I sat in silence, staring at the wall, wondering how a woman was supposed to raise a boy alone. That night, I swore he'd never know hunger or fear the way I had as a child. The next morning, I put on a sweater, tied back my hair, and walked into a broker's office for a job I wasn't qualified for. I didn't care. Survival doesn't wait for credentials. Those first years, I worked until my bones ached. Mornings knocking on doors of houses I couldn't afford. Nights studying land values under a dim lamp until the numbers blurred. At first, property reports read like gibberish, but slowly I learned to speak the language of real estate. By year 3, I bought a duplex. My hand shook so badly at the signing that the notary asked if I was ill. I wasn't ill. I was terrified and alive. One deal led to another. Houses to apartments. Apartments to commercial buildings. Commercial to towers. Brick by brick. I built the Langford Empire. And with it, I built Michael's world: new shoes, new cars, tuition, vacations. I gave him everything. Maybe too much, because while I counted every dime, he only saw the results. At 18, he thought money appeared by magic. At 25, he asked me for a condo like a child asking for candy. At 30, he brought Sabrina into my home and asked for luxury honeymoons like it was his birthright. And I said yes. Always yes. Because in my heart, I still saw the boy crying into my blouse. And I thought if I kept giving, I'd never lose him. But love, when warped by money, doesn't grow closer. It grows cruel. Sabrina noticed it from the start. She smelled weakness the way a fox smells blood. At family dinners, she'd slip her little barbs in with that sugary laugh. "Mrs. Langford, that dress makes you look wise. Maybe you should try something fresher." Michael would chuckle and nod along. I'd force a smile, hiding the sting. Every laugh left a scar, but I swallowed it, because mothers are taught silence is the price of peace. It took me years to realize silence isn't peace, it's surrender. Sitting in that pew at St. Andrew's, I looked up at the soaring arches and thought I've been surrendering for too long. The $22 million gift I had prepared, that wasn't generosity. That was desperation. It was me throwing money at a crack in the wall, hoping it would hold. But that morning, when I touched my bare scalp and felt that mocking note against my pillow, something snapped. My love for my son hadn't died, but the illusions had. I pressed my hand to the purse on my lap, where the recorder waited. Proof. For once, I wasn't going to beg to be believed. Did you know in Japanese art there's a practice called kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold, so the cracks become the most beautiful part? Some scholars debate whether it's philosophy or just pretty craftsmanship, but I thought of it sitting there. My shaved scalp was a crack, my humiliation a fracture, and maybe, just maybe, I could fill it with something stronger than shame. The organ swelled, pulling me back to the present. Guests were starting to fill the church, voices echoing off the stone. I straightened my shawl, set my chin, and fixed a faint smile on my lips. Let them see a proud mother, poised for her son's wedding. But inside, I was no longer the woman who gave and gave until there was nothing left. Inside, I was sharpening myself into gold. The pews of St. Andrew's filled slowly, the scent of roses and candle wax growing heavier in the air. Guests whispered and smiled, dressed in their best, as if they were about to witness a fairy tale. To them, this was a story about love. To me, it was a story about masks and how easily masks slip when you know where to look. I kept my head high, silver wig shimmering under the stained glass light, and watched the flow of people. Sabrina's friends, glossy and loud, swept in with perfume clouds. Some of Michael's colleagues arrived, shaking hands, congratulating him, proud of his success. They saw him as a golden boy. None of them knew the years of quiet handouts behind that shine. As I sat there, my mind pulled me backward again, tracing the long road that had led to this moment. When Michael graduated college, I thought I had done it. He walked across that stage in his robe, smiling, confident, degree in hand. I believed I'd raised a man who could stand on his own 2 feet, but the truth came quick. Within a month, he asked me for a down payment on a condo. "You'll cover it, right, Mom?" he said casually, as if I were his bank. And I did. I wrote the check, telling myself it was just one time. Then came the luxury trips. Europe, first class. "Mom, Sabrina and I want to do it right." He didn't even ask. It was a statement. And I agreed again. It wasn't generosity anymore. It was guilt. I thought if I gave enough, maybe he wouldn't feel the hole left by losing his father so young. Maybe he'd still see me as the mother who held him through grief. But I was wrong. I hadn't raised a man who cherished sacrifice. I'd raised a prince who believed sacrifice was his due. And Sabrina, she only sharpened it. From the first time I met her, Sabrina looked at me with eyes that weren't curious, or kind, or even cautious. They were calculating. She was polished, yes, career talk, travel stories, a laugh that could charm anyone in a room. But when her gaze landed on me, it was appraisal, as though she were already moving furniture in a house she hadn't yet bought. At dinners, she'd take sly jabs at me, hidden under jokes. "Mrs. Langford, you've done so much, but maybe it's time to rest. Let the younger generation handle things." Michael would smile, sip his wine, and nod. I'd swallow my hurt with salad and pretend not to notice. Old age wisdom tells you something simple what people say in jokes. They mean in truth. I ignored that for too long. Did you know studies show spoiled children often grow into adults who struggle with resilience? Some academics argue it's nurture, not nature. Others say entitlement has roots deeper than parenting. I'll tell you this: when you hand your child everything, they forget how to lift their own hands. And Michael had forgotten. Now, on the most important day of his life, I realized he saw me not as a mother, but as a vault. And Sabrina saw me not as family, but as a nuisance to erase. The cruel note on my pillow proved it. The organ began a low roll, testing chords. Guests hushed, turning toward the altar. I adjusted my shawl and took a slow breath. From the corner of my eye, I saw Michael arrive. He looked every inch the polished groom in a black tuxedo, white tie crisp, hair slicked back. He smiled, greeted guests, shook hands, but I saw the faint twitch at the corner of his mouth, the same one he had when he was lying as a boy. I knew him too well. Sabrina arrived minutes later, still in her prep gown, flanked by bridesmaids as she disappeared into the bridal room. Laughter spilled out behind the closed door, sharp, high laughter. I pressed my hand to my purse. Inside, the recorder waited. Something in me whispered today. Their laughter will become my evidence. I lifted my chin and looked at the stained glass above the altar, light spilling like fire across the stone. For years, I had played the role of silent mother. But today, I was done being silent. The organ music quieted as ushers guided guests into their seats, the grand hum of voices softening under the vaulted ceiling. I sat in the front row, still as stone, my shawl folded neatly, my purse heavy with its secret. My eyes traced the high arches above me, but my ears were tuned to every echo, every whisper that drifted through those cold stone halls. I hadn't been sitting long when I heard him, Michael, my son's voice, low and urgent, carrying just enough for me to catch. I slipped from my pew as quietly as a shadow and walked toward the side corridor. A column hid me as I pressed my back against it, my breath caught in my throat. Michael stood just feet away, phone pressed tight to his ear. "Tessa," he whispered, sharper than I'd ever heard him. "No, don't come here. I told you after the ceremony. Just wait." Tessa. The name hit me like ice water down my spine. I knew her, his secretary. Bright smile, sharp eyes, too eager to please. I'd seen her dozens of times at his office, thought she was just ambitious. But now, hearing her name in this hushed corner on his wedding day, everything clicked. Michael's voice dropped, ragged with tension. "Once I get the money from my mother, everything changes. We won't have to sneak around anymore. Just be patient. I'm not going to blow this before I have what I need." I gripped the hem of my shawl so tightly I thought the fabric might tear. My knees trembled, but I forced myself still. That money he meant the $22 million I had locked away. My life's work. My son's freedom ticket with another woman. My hand shook as I slid the recorder from my purse, clicking it on without a sound. His words poured into it, every syllable slicing deeper than the last. "You know how she is," Michael muttered into the phone. "She always wants to please me, always afraid I'll go without. She'll sign it all over today. Just a little longer, and we'll have everything. A fresh start. No strings." The silence that followed was heavier than the marble walls around me. I leaned back against the column, my eyes shut tight. I had known he was entitled, spoiled by my own hand. But I had never, in my worst nightmares, imagined he would scheme to drain me dry and run into the arms of another woman on the very day he married. The boy who once clutched my skirt, sobbing for his father, was gone. In his place stood a man who could sell his mother for freedom. I bit my lip until I tasted iron, forcing myself not to sob. When the call ended, Michael adjusted his jacket, smoothed his tie, and walked out with a confident smile plastered on his face. To the crowd waiting in the pews, he looked like the perfect groom. But I knew better. And in my purse, glowing red, the recorder knew better too. I eased back to my seat, pretending to admire the flowers lining the aisle. My chest was tight, my heart hammering, but beneath the ache, a new current surged resolve. Old age wisdom says sometimes the ugliest truths arrive in whispers, not shouts. And if you're patient enough to listen, you can catch them before they crush you. I had just caught mine. Did you know that in Greek tragedy, the word hubris, pride, taken too far, was said to blind men before the gods punished them? Scholars argue whether hubris destroys men by fate or by their own hand. I sat there thinking maybe both. Michael's pride was already sharpening the blade that would cut him down, and I would be the one holding the mirror to his face. The organ swelled again, calling guests to attention. The ceremony was about to begin. My hands were steady now, folded lightly in my lap. Michael thought he was moments away from his perfect day. Sabrina thought she was about to win her crown. But I sat in the front pew, purse on my lap, recorder warm, and knew something neither of them did. The show they had staged was already unraveling. The bridal prep room was tucked down a side corridor. Its door cracked just enough to spill out light, perfume, and bursts of laughter. My feet carried me there before my mind could object. I told myself I only wanted air, a moment to breathe, but truthfully, I needed to hear what Sabrina sounded like when she thought no one was listening. I stopped just shy of the door, pressing myself against the cool stone wall. My scalp itched beneath the wig, still raw from the morning's cruelty, but I forced myself to stand steady. The recorder in my purse blinked its tiny red light like a heartbeat. "Inside," Sabrina's voice rang out, sharp with triumph. "In just a few hours, half of his fortune will be mine. 22 million. Michael doesn't have a clue." My fingers clenched the doorframe. One of the bridesmaids giggled. And after that, Sabrina's voice dropped, edged like glass. "After that, I file for divorce. I've already spoken to an attorney. With that money, I'll be free, comfortable, and untouchable." The room burst into shrill laughter, bouncing off the marble walls. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. Another voice piped up a bridesmaid I didn't recognize. "But what about his mother? She's a handful." The laughter turned meaner, more pointed. Sabrina sneered. "Don't worry. I'll push Michael to put her in a luxury nursing home. That old woman won't bother us again." The laughter that followed cut deeper than scissors on skin. I stood frozen, every nerve burning. Anger surged through me, hot and pure. For a moment, I wanted to storm into that room, rip the veil from her head, and scream in her face. But I didn't. Life had taught me battles aren't won with rage. They're won with patience. And I had proof now. I slid my fingers across the purse, feeling the recorder hum beneath them, capturing every vile word. Old age wisdom says if someone mocks you behind closed doors, they'll eventually try to bury you in daylight too. I thought of Sabrina's sharp smiles at dinner, her constant little digs, Michael's easy chuckle beside her. All of it had been preparation for this to erase me completely. But she had miscalculated. She thought shaving my head was enough to make me hide. She thought one cruel note would silence me. Instead, she had handed me fuel. Did you know some anthropologists argue that human laughter evolved as a weapon? Not just joy, a signal of dominance, mocking those weaker. Some disagree, saying laughter is only bonding. But as I stood there listening to Sabrina's shrill chorus, I knew the truth. Laughter can be a knife. I turned away from the door and walked back toward the sanctuary, each step steady, deliberate. By the time I slipped back into the front pew, no one noticed I had gone. Guests smiled, whispered, adjusted coats. The air smelled of roses and polished wood, but I was different. I was no longer the woman who thought a $22 million gift could buy love, no longer the mother who silenced herself for peace. I was the woman with 2 recordings, each a blade sharper than any vow spoken today. I glanced at my reflection in the stained glass glow silver-haired, navy dress, calm smile. To everyone else, I looked like the picture of a proud mother of the groom. But beneath that smile, I carried a storm. And when the time came, I would let it break. The organ swelled, deep and thunderous, shaking the stone arches as the ceremony began. Guests hushed, turning toward the back as Sabrina appeared on her father's arm. draped in white lace that shimmered under the stained glass. Cameras flashed, sighs of admiration rippled across the pews, and people whispered about how perfect she looked. Perfect. The word itself felt poisonous to me. Behind that veil, behind that glowing face, I had just heard the truth, the voice of a woman who mocked me, who plotted to discard Michael, and who laughed about putting me in a nursing home like I was yesterday's news. But no one else knew. I sat straight, hands folded in my lap, shawl neat, recorder warm in my purse. To anyone watching, I was a proud mother glowing with joy. But inside, every vow, every smile, every soft hymn sounded like a lie echoing off the walls. Michael stood at the altar in his black tuxedo, eyes bright, smile practiced. When Sabrina reached him, he took her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Together, they looked like a fairy tale couple. But I had heard his hushed whispers in the corridor. Once I get the money from my mother, everything changes. My son's vows would be ashes before the words even left his lips. The priest spoke solemnly about the sanctity of marriage, about love and trust, about sacrifice. His voice rang high, but to me it sounded almost mocking. Then it was Michael's turn. He looked at Sabrina, face steady, voice smooth. I promise to love you, respect you, share joy and sorrow, and be by your side for life. I nearly laughed. Those words would have been beautiful if I hadn't heard him whisper to Tessa, his mistress. Only hours earlier, Sabrina followed with her vows, her eyes shining with practiced tears. I promise to stand by you, care for you, and keep our love forever. Forever. A word she had already sliced in two with her bridesmaid's laughter, plotting to file for divorce the moment the money hit her hands. My jaw tightened. When the priest asked, "Does anyone object to this union?" my breath caught. My body wanted to stand, to shout everything, to rip away the masks right then. But I didn't. Old age wisdom says sometimes truth, like wine, needs to breathe before it's served. This wasn't the moment. Not yet. I stayed seated, eyes forward, lips pressed in a faint smile. The crowd clapped when the priest finally declared them husband and wife. Michael leaned in, kissed Sabrina, and applause thundered through the church. People stood, smiling, crying, believing they had just witnessed a sacred union, but I knew they had witnessed a carefully staged lie. Did you know that in medieval Europe, marriage was as much a financial contract as a sacred vow? Some argue it was never about love, but alliances and property. Maybe it still is, I thought, watching my son and Sabrina walk hand in hand down the aisle, smiling like actors on stage. As the couple passed me, Sabrina gave me a brief, sugary smile, her perfume drifting close. Michael glanced at me quickly, then away, unable to hold my eyes. They thought I was beaten. They thought the morning's humiliation had silenced me, but I sat tall in the front pew, purse firm under my hand, and whispered to myself, "Your play is almost over. Mine hasn't even begun." The reception hall shimmered with gold light, chandeliers blazing against white roses and crystal glasses. Guests spilled in laughing, toasting, clinking champagne. Music floated under the hum of voices, violins weaving through the air like silk. On the surface, it was flawless, a celebration straight out of a magazine. But beneath it, I felt the tension curling like smoke. My son and his new bride sat at the head table, beaming, basking in praise. Every so often, Sabrina's hand squeezed Michael's, her smile too wide, her laugh too polished. And Michael, my boy, who once begged me for bedtime stories, looked like a stranger, proud, smug, certain of victory. I sat quietly, hands on my lap, sipping water instead of wine. My purse rested beside my chair, the recorder tucked inside, glowing like a hidden flame. I had two weapons now, Michael's whisper to his mistress and Sabrina's cruel confession in the bridal room. It was enough. As the evening wore on, the room swelled with noise. Toasts were made, jokes cracked, stories told about Michael's childhood. People laughed, glasses clinked, waiters weaved through the tables with trays of champagne. Finally, the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, his voice booming. "Ladies and gentlemen, we invite the groom's mother, Mrs. Beatrice Langford, to share a few words on this joyous occasion." Heads turned. The chandelier light spilled onto me. 100 expectant eyes waited. I rose slowly, smoothing my navy silk dress, and took my glass of champagne in hand. My heels clicked softly against the marble as I walked to the microphone. The room hushed. I smiled the calm smile of a proud mother and began. "First, thank you all for being here to celebrate with our family. For me, this moment is sacred. My son is stepping into a new chapter of his life, and as his mother, I am deeply proud." Applause rippled. I paused, took a small sip, then set the glass down. My husband died when Michael was only 12. That night, I made a promise that I would protect him with everything I had, that he would never know hunger, never know fear. For 33 years, I lived by that vow. Soft murmurs, nods, warm looks. Some older guests dabbed their eyes. I took a breath, my voice steady but lower. And today, I plan to give him and his bride a gift. $22 million. My life's work, the sum of decades of sacrifice. The room gasped. Glasses rattled, chairs shifted. I saw Michael stiffen. Sabrina's eyes glint with excitement. I lifted my chin. But there is something life has taught me. Not every sacrifice is valued, and not everyone deserves the gifts you give. The air dropped heavy. People leaned in, confused, curious. I reached into my purse, pulled out the small recorder, and set it on the table before me. The red light blinked alive. Michael's voice spilled into the hall. "Once I get the money from my mother, everything changes. We won't have to sneak around anymore. Just be patient. She always wants to please me. She'll sign it all over today." The room went silent, then gasped as one. Michael shot to his feet, face pale, stammering. "Mom! This isn't what it sounds like." I turned my gaze on him, calm and unflinching, then explained whose voice that is. "Michael." Whispers erupted. Guests craned their necks. Before he could speak, I pressed play again. This time, Sabrina's laughter filled the room. "Once the money's in, I'll file for divorce. I'll push Michael to put her in a nursing home. That old woman won't bother us again." Gasps turned into shouts. A glass shattered. Someone muttered, "Oh my God." Sabrina's face drained white, her lipstick trembling on her lips. I let the silence stretch, then spoke, clear as the bells outside. "So no, there will be no gift today. Not 22 million, not $22. Greed and betrayal have already taken enough. I raise my glass, hand steady. The greatest gift I can give today is the truth. And the truth is simple greed, and lies never win. I set the glass down and stepped away. Behind me, chaos erupted. The chandelier light burned hot on the crowd as my words settled like thunder rolling across the hall. For a heartbeat, the room was silent, like the air right before a storm breaks. Then it happened. Gasps, murmurs, voices clashing together. A few guests covered their mouths. Others grabbed their phones. Some recording, some whispering frantically. The fairy tale had cracked open, spilling rot for everyone to see. Michael's face twisted, panic pushing through his polished, groomed smile. He stumbled forward, voice breaking. "Mom, it was a joke. Just a joke. Don't twist it." I raised a hand, silencing him with nothing more than calm. Jokes don't plan escape routes with secretaries. Jokes don't put mothers in nursing homes. Sabrina shot up, her white lace gown shimmering under the golden light. But her eyes were wide with fury. "She's lying. This is fake." The recorder still blinked red on the table. "Would you like me to play it again, Sabrina?" I asked softly. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The hall erupted into whispers, half shocked, half scandalized. Sabrina's parents, pale-faced, stood frozen near their seats, eyes hard, disappointment carved deep. Michael's friends shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his eyes. A bridesmaid buried her face in her hands. Ashamed, Michael slammed his fist against the table, desperate now. "You don't understand. I was under pressure. It doesn't mean anything." I stepped closer, my voice low but cutting. "Michael, I raised you. I buried your father and built an empire brick by brick so you'd never feel hunger. And this is what you do with it. You sell your mother's love for a mistress and your wife's trust for money." His knees buckled, and he collapsed into his chair, head in his hands. Sabrina tried again, voice trembling now, her hands gripping the lace at her chest. "You ruined everything. You planned this." I smiled faintly, tilting my head. "No, Sabrina, you ruined everything. I just pressed play." Laughter sharp, incredulous, broke from somewhere in the crowd. Guests were no longer fooled. Old age wisdom says truth has a sound heavier than any lie. It doesn't need volume to fill a room. And tonight, the truth filled every corner, choking the air until no one could breathe the same way again. Michael rose again, his voice cracking. "Mom, please don't do this. You'll destroy us." I met his eyes, calm, steady. "No, son. You destroyed yourself. I'm just showing you the mirror." The master of ceremonies stood awkwardly in the corner, clutching his cue cards like a drowning man holding driftwood. But even he knew the evening had slipped beyond saving. Did you know historians argue that in ancient trials, public shame was sometimes a harsher sentence than imprisonment? They say shame lingers longer. Looking at Michael and Sabrina, I believed it. The wedding had become a courtroom, the reception a witness stand, and I had handed down the verdict. I lifted my glass one last time. So let us toast not to money, not to masks, but to truth. Because truth always finds its way to daylight. I set the glass down, gathered my shawl, and walked away from the head table. Behind me, Voices rose, chaos, arguments, cries, phones snapping pictures, Sabrina sobbing, Michael cursing under his breath. But my steps were steady, my heels clicking softly against the marble. The woman who had entered this day humiliated, stripped of dignity, was gone. The woman walking out was Beatrice Langford reborn, unshaken, and free. The moment I stepped away from the microphone, the reception hall dissolved into chaos. Voices clashed like cymbals, phones flashed, chairs scraped back. The perfect golden glow of chandeliers now illuminated a battlefield guests turning on each other, whispering furiously, pointing at Michael, at Sabrina, at me. But I walked steady, shawl wrapped around me like armor. Behind me, Michael slumped in his chair, face ashen, while Sabrina clutched her lace bodice with trembling fingers. I didn't stop until I reached the lobby. The marble floor echoed under my heels. "Mom," Michael's voice cracked behind me. I turned slowly. He came stumbling forward, desperation written across his face. The polished groom from earlier was gone. Sweat dampened his hair. His hands shook as he reached for me. "Please don't do this. You don't understand. I didn't mean—" I cut him off with a single look. "You didn't mean to get caught." His mouth worked, but no words came. Sabrina's heels clicked hard against the floor as she burst out after him, her gown puffing awkwardly as she shoved past guests trying to calm her. "You ruined my wedding!" she shrieked, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "You lying old witch!" I didn't flinch. "No, Sabrina. You ruined it yourself. You just didn't expect an audience." Guests spilled into the lobby now, drawn like moths to scandal. Phones raised. Some gasped. Some shook their heads. Others whispered, already drafting the story they'd retell for years. Sabrina's parents stood stiff at the doorway. Her mother's eyes brimmed with shame. Her father turned away, jaw tight. They didn't come to her side. Michael dropped to his knees right there in the lobby, hands clutching at mine. "Mom, please, I swear I'll change. I'll fix it. Just don't take it all away. Don't take me away." His voice cracked into sobs, the sound of a grown man who'd never learned how to fall without expecting someone to catch him. For a moment, the mother in me ached. I saw the boy who once cried himself to sleep after losing his father. But then I remembered the phone call, the words to Tessa, the laughter in the bridal room. I pulled my hand free, gentle but firm. "Michael, I gave you everything. You chose betrayal. Now you'll learn the price of it." He froze, as if my words were a sentence heavier than prison. Old age wisdom says truth doesn't break a person. It shows them who they really are. I watched my son crumple under the weight of his reflection, and my heart hurt. But I did not bend. Sabrina tried one last time, her voice rising in a shrill cry. "She's lying! This is all lies!" But the crowd had already judged her. Guests murmured, shook their heads, turned away. A bridesmaid whispered. We all heard it. Another muttered, "Disgusting." Sabrina's face twisted with rage, then crumbled into sobs. Her dream gown, her fairy tale wedding, her carefully staged performance, it all disintegrated in front of her audience. And I knew then their masks were gone, stripped in daylight. Did you know, in medieval courts, public shame was considered worse than any fine scholar's debate whether humiliation is punishment or purification? I stood there watching Michael and Sabrina unravel and thought perhaps it's both. I turned, pulled my shawl tighter, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, voices still clashed, but I no longer carried them. For years, I had walked bent beneath guilt and fear. Tonight, I walked straight, free. The mother they mocked, the woman they tried to erase, she was gone. The one who left the hall that night was Beatrice Langford, whole, unafraid, and finally awake. The next morning, pale winter sunlight slipped through my bedroom curtains, painting the room in soft gold. The house was quiet, too quiet. No echo of Michael's footsteps. No shrill laugh from Sabrina. No phone buzzing with their demands. Just the tick of the old clock in the hallway and the faint hum of the heater. I brewed coffee, poured it into my favorite porcelain mug, the one with roses Richard bought me on our last anniversary, and sat at the kitchen table. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. On the table lay the red leather notebook I'd once used to keep track of Michael's expenses. I opened it, flipped through page after page of transfers, checks, investments, all the lifelines I'd handed my son, believing I was protecting him. My chest tightened. With a red pen, I drew one long line through it all. The old Beatrice would have cried over it. The new Beatrice smiled. By noon, I was seated in Avery's law office, papers spread across the polished oak desk, his silver-framed glasses sliding down his nose as he explained each clause. "We're removing Michael as beneficiary," he said carefully, "and terminating the trust accounts you set up in his name. Do you want to reassign them?" I nodded. Yes. I want the money moved into a foundation. Support for widows, single mothers, women clawing their way back into the world. They're the ones who'll treasure it, not squander it. He studied me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Beatrice, I've known you 20 years. I've never seen you so certain." I signed every page without hesitation. Each stroke of the pen felt like a cut, severing chains I'd dragged for decades. By the time the last page was signed, my chest felt lighter, my back straighter. Back home, I wandered the living room. The walls were lined with photographs, Michael's graduation, birthdays, Christmas mornings. I touched the frames one by one, then lifted them carefully down. I didn't throw them away. I packed them into a box and slid it into the closet. Not erased, just put aside. Old age wisdom says sometimes the hardest love is letting go, not holding on. I'd finally learned that lesson. That evening, I drove along the coast. The ocean stretched dark and endless, waves crashing against the rocks, salt heavy in the air. I parked, wrapped my shawl tight, and carried a sketchbook to the sand. Did you know that every seashell on the shore is the remains of something once alive? Scholars debate whether that makes beaches graveyards or museums. I sat there thinking maybe both, but also maybe they're reminders that even after being broken, you can still be beautiful. I sketched until my fingers ached, letting the lines and shadows bleed my emotions out onto the page. When I looked up, the horizon glowed crimson, the sea roared, endless, free, and I whispered into the wind, "So am I." Spring arrived late in Boston, but when it came, it burst open like a long-held breath. Cherry blossoms lined the streets, petals drifting down on sidewalks like confetti, softening the sharp edges of the city. I walked beneath them one morning, my shawl loose around my shoulders, and thought, this is what a beginning feels like. The house no longer echoed with Michael's demands or Sabrina's laughter. Instead, It carried quieter sounds, the scratch of a paintbrush on canvas, the hum of a kettle, the rustle of pages in a book. I had signed up for painting classes at a small seaside studio, something I'd secretly longed for since I was a girl. At 70, my hands were finally free enough to hold a brush without fear of wasting time. The first time I pressed blue paint across the canvas, I felt like a child again. My classmates, widows, retirees, a few dreamers like me welcomed me with warm smiles. Among them was Samuel, a retired engineer with salt and pepper hair and a quiet laugh. He once told me, "Mistakes just add character to the piece." I remember thinking he wasn't only talking about art. Each week, I painted seascapes, sunsets, lavender fields. Each week, my heart stitched itself together, color by color. One afternoon, I returned home from class to find Michael's car parked by my gate. He sat slumped in the driver's seat, shoulders hunched, a shadow of the polished man he had once been. My chest tightened, but I opened the gate. "Inside," he spoke haltingly, eyes red. "Mom, I lost everything. Sabrina's gone. The investments collapsed. I have no one." His voice broke. "I don't want money. I want your forgiveness." For a long time, I said nothing. The silence stretched until he finally lifted his eyes to mine. "Michael," I whispered, "forgiveness isn't about erasing what you did. It's about freeing myself. You are my son. That will never change. But the part of me that paid every bill, every mistake, every betrayal, that part is gone." Tears streaked down his face. He dropped to his knees like he had the night of the wedding. But this time, I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "If you want to change, you'll have to stand on your own feet. I'll love you as your mother, but I will never be your bank again." He nodded slowly, broken, but I saw a glimmer, maybe the first step toward becoming the man I once believed he could be. Did you know some philosophers argue forgiveness isn't for the wrongdoer at all? It's medicine for the one wronged. Others say true forgiveness demands reconciliation. I think it's both, and neither. Forgiveness is choosing to let the wound scar, but not fester. Months passed. My paintings grew bolder, brighter. The foundation I created for single mothers and widows took shape, helping women rebuild lives the way I once did. Samuel often stopped by with tulips, joking, "Late bloomers last longer," and I would laugh, not with bitterness, but with joy. One evening, standing on my porch with the ocean stretching dark and endless, I held a finished canvas in my hands, a woman with silver hair standing against crashing waves, unbroken, smiling. It was me, the me I had almost forgotten, and I whispered into the night. My season has come late, but it has come. On the morning of my son Michael's wedding, I awoke to the sharp sting of antiseptic and a cruel note pinned to my pillow. My silver hair had been shaved off in my sleep. The handwriting and the perfume on the page told me all I needed to know. Sabrina, my future daughter-in-law, had humiliated me on purpose. That same morning, I closed the safe on the $22 million wedding gift I had prepared. The money that was meant to bind us together would never leave my hands. At St. Andrew's Church, I disguised my wounds with a wig, but inside I carried fire. I overheard Michael whispering to his mistress about running away with my fortune, and later, I caught Sabrina mocking me, planning divorce once she secured half. I recorded every word. During the reception, beneath glittering chandeliers, I stood and revealed the truth. Michael's betrayal, Sabrina's cruelty laid bare in front of every guest. Their masks shattered. The gift was canceled. The fairy tale collapsed. In the days that followed, I rewrote my will, cutting them out entirely and creating a foundation to help widows and single mothers. I took painting classes, found solace in art, and rediscovered a piece of myself I thought was lost forever. When Michael finally returned, broken and repentant, I gave him what I could, my love as his mother, but no more money, no more blind sacrifice. I learned that silence is not peace, that forgiveness is not surrender, and that truth, though sharp, can set you free. My humiliation became my turning point. My late bloom, because I am no longer the woman who begged for love. I am Beatrice Langford, the woman who stood against betrayal and chose herself.